Welcome to this session on the cultivation of psychosocial skills for high performance within educational programs. I'm Rena Subotnik. I'm director of the Center for Psychology in Schools and Education at the American Psychological Association. I'm introducing this session that will be conducted as a series of interviews by Paula Olszewski-Kubilius, who is executive director of the Center for Talent Development at Northwestern University. The interviewees are leaders at three outstanding programs. Katie Berger is Chief Student Affairs Officer at the Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy, a selective state residential high school. Susan Gold is head of the Feynman School, a private K-8 school for gifted students in Bethesda, Maryland. And Christy Wilkins is Executive Director of Dramatic Results, an out-of-school STEAM program for low-income gifted middle school students in Long Beach, California. Besides being leaders of outstanding programs, they share another passion, and that is the psychosocial well-being of their students. Before we hear from the panelists about how they manifest their passion in their program, I'd like to provide a little background on what we mean by psychosocial skills. First, let's parse the word psychosocial into two important categories: mental skills and social skills. Social skills are a little easier to explain. They allow your child to interact effectively with other people, making and keeping healthy relationships. Mental skills allow your child to understand him or herself, regulate feelings and behavior, and set meaningful goals. These two areas of competence inform and interact with each other. Mental skills emerge from interactions with others, and social skills develop along with self-awareness. So although social and emotional competencies can be distinguished from one another, they develop in tandem, each building on the other. Taking it one step further, there are protective and promotive psychosocial skills. Protective skills support students' sense of well-being, both internally and with others. Promotive skills, those that are especially useful for talent development, are based on the psychology from the worlds of sport and performing arts that assist talented individuals by optimizing high performance, such as screening out distractions or being a dependable teammate. Let me turn over to Paula now to begin our interviews.
Thank you, Rita. As Rita said, we have individuals who are leaders of three different types of organizations that serve gifted students: a private gifted school, K-8, a state-supported STEM high school, and an out-of-school community-based program. So my first question to our participants is this: can you describe in more detail your program or setting and why you wanted to incorporate psychosocial skill development into your work with students? Can we start with Christy?
Sure. Firstly, thank you so much, Paula, for including me in this panel, and it's nice to meet everybody else. So Dramatic Results, as Rena mentioned, is a nonprofit organization located in California. We have the good fortune with the U.S. Department of Ed grant to have the opportunity to work with a subset of gifted low-income students that are in middle school in Long Beach, California, longitudinally. We are getting to work with them from 6th through the end of 8th grades. And this is a randomized control study. So we're very excited to have a chance to really test this model. So with this model, we are able to work with the students year round, out of school time. So on Saturdays and during the summers, we, for example, in the summertime, the students have, before COVID, was very different, I must say, let's put it that way. So before COVID, through a series of partnerships, we worked collaboratively with 10 different agencies, whether it's the US Sailing Center, we have engineers from Boeing and Northrop, we have architects, we have digital designer and game designers, a whole variety of professionals working with us. And during the summer, the students get to come to the beach. And I will say that 99% of our kids, despite living within 7 miles of the ocean, have not had the chance to ever get into the water. But within 2 weeks, our students were able to learn to rig and sail and race a 22-foot keelboat in teams out of the bay and around our oil islands, which was a huge feat for them. And then secondarily, using the design thinking process, we have been able to have the kids use both 2D and 3D design technology. They've constructed and then raced cardboard and duct tape only rowboats, launching from a dock, going out into the bay, around the buoys and back. And about 70% of our kids actually made it without sinking. So this is big for us, and this is where all the psychosocial skills come in. The other big piece for us is that we are providing a 200-hour-a-year teacher residency model for pre-service teachers at 3 of our local Cal State universities, none of which offer any kind of programming in gifted education. So for us, the reason that the psychosocial skills are critical is that when we started working with these kids, we hit a wall. We realized that our kids, and I will say in Long Beach Unified, there are no dedicated gifted education classrooms. Our kids are fully integrated with our gen ed. And as a result, our kids, for a lack of a better term, are stultified somewhat. They are not challenged to go to the next level. They complain about great boredom, and they are not used to being around, as they say, kids like me. So coming into our program is a very unique experience. The majority, I would say 98% of our families are immigrant, first generation, and low income. So they do not have the community resources. So we quickly learned that our kids needed the opportunity to both just be exposed to, gain practice, and gain confidence, not just in those psychosocial skills with their peers, which is essential, but also learning to work with adults. And that included both our staffing as well as the STEAM professionals. So for our kids to get to pursue their passions and have those conversations with actual architects and engineers has been hugely valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Susan, can you tell us more about your school and why you decided to focus on psychosocial skills for your students?
Sure. Thank you so much for including me in this amazing panel. Feynman School is an independent co-educational school that enrolls young gifted learners in actually preschool through middle school in the DC area. And I founded the school along with my husband, Robert Gold, 11 years ago, as we saw that the needs of the gifted and talented learners in our area were not being adequately met. So we offer a unique learning environment for inquisitive students who just amaze and delight us every day with their energy, their talent, and of course, their sense of humor. And at school, our students from 3 to 14 think, question, explore, and create in an engaging setting. We allow the students at Feynman School to discover through the wonder of hands-on science, which promotes deep understanding rather than rote learning. And through our experiential approach to learning, the teachers and students discover untapped potential and talents, as well as further cultivate burgeoning talents. We offer students many opportunities for interdisciplinary learning so that they can see how the disciplines work in tandem with each other. And we know from one of our advisors at Harvard, Dr. Eric Mazur, that the silos between fields of study within higher education and beyond are actually coming down. So we want our students to be prepared for this global interconnected world. So why do we focus on psychosocial skills? We understand that it's just not enough to be identified as a gifted learner. By founding the school, we've committed ourselves to the responsibility of helping these gifted children unearth their superpowers, as we call them, their talents and passions, with the goal of using these for the greater good, leaving the world a better place than how they received it. And in order to fulfill that goal, we have to go beyond an advanced curriculum and incorporate the teaching or coaching of these critical psychosocial skills. And by weaving the skills seamlessly into our school's culture, we lay the foundation for our students to feel confident and capable to advocate for themselves going forward. We like to focus on what we call I-cubed, ideation, creative problem solving, where we identify the community and global problems that our world faces today and beyond. Then we work on implementation, and that nothing is done in a vacuum. I just heard Dr. Radia Perlman speak. She's known as the mother of the internet, saying that the worst habit that we could teach children is that they should always do their own work. So she really is a big proponent of collaboration and teamwork, as are we. And then the impact. These children are going to be our next leaders. So we need to ask ourselves, what kind of leaders do we want them to be? They're not going to just be prepared to get a good job. They're actually going to be defining and creating their own jobs, which is why they need to be empowered with these psychosocial skills. So thank you.
Thank you. And Katie, tell us how why you focused on psychosocial skill development at IMSA.
Yes, thank you, Paula. Again, my name is Katie Berker. I serve as the Chief Student Affairs Officer at the Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy, often referred to as IMSA. IMSA is a residential high school for STEM talented students from across the state of Illinois. We serve 650 students, grades 10 through 12, and our student population is evenly split, male and female. Just over 22% of our students identify as Black or Latinx, and nearly 17% qualify for free or reduced lunch. We are funded by the state of Illinois, so our students do not pay tuition or room and board to attend IMSA. It's purely based on their academic talent. At IMSA, when referring to psychosocial skills, we often use the broader term, developing the whole person. So students come to IMSA from their community schools entering as 10th graders. They have excelled academically in the past in a traditional learning environment, and most of them have not experienced academic struggle prior to coming to IMSA. They haven't had to ask for help, and in most cases, they're the students that their peers are coming to for academic assistance. So they arrive at IMSA and they're placed in this new academic environment that's much more experiential and inquiry-based, as I heard Susan say. And in a classroom environment where faculty do not simply lecture to share information, but students are challenged to really struggle through learning with their peers and generate their own meaning. And they struggle maybe for the first time in their life with needing to ask for help and practice self-advocacy. Students need to self-regulate their time and their motivation because they're living independently. And so at 14 and 15 years old, many of our students haven't developed those executive function skills just yet. And I don't know why we would expect them to, since many adults are still refining their executive function skills as well. Additionally, our students, they're living independently. So they come from 55 different counties across the state of Illinois. They leave their families probably a little bit younger than they initially expected to come live in Aurora, Illinois at IMSA. Some of our students struggle to wake up in the morning with an alarm and make it to class on time without parents or guardian intervention. They are living with a roommate, and so now they need to negotiate the norms for living in a residence hall room, and when is it acceptable to play music, and when do the lights need to go out. So within the Division of Student Affairs, we really create opportunities for students to develop and practice psychosocial skills. We offer transitional programs for our students facilitated by our school counselors. We have a navigation program for our sophomores who are transitioning into IMSA, really focused on building healthy relationships with peers and with IMSA staff. That piece is really important, building those relationships with the adults, as some of my colleagues already mentioned. Identifying and utilizing academy resources, self-advocacy, and of course, those executive function skills that I mentioned. We also realized a few years ago that our students come to IMSA and they have this wonderful safety net kind of weaved together for them of all of these supports. And some of our alumni told us a couple of years ago, you know, we transitioned to college and a lot of that safety net disappeared, and we really didn't understand what that transition looked like. And so we were challenged to put in place a transitional program for our seniors prior to graduation to equip them with the next set of skills that they would need as they went on to college, university, or the workforce. We utilize our residential life program to provide educational and social support, interventions, and experiences for our students. And it's really an opportunity for us to partner with parents to develop the whole person. And lastly, we create opportunities for our students to find their voice and advocate for the changes that they want to see in the world. When students come to IMSA, we really tell them, you have the ability to change the world, but you can't do it alone. And you need to be able to build buy-in and sell and articulate your ideas. And we've created a leadership education program that gives them the opportunity to do that. As my colleagues mentioned, our programs are constantly evolving, and most recently, they've evolved in response to COVID and the need for us to transition to distance learning. We solicited some feedback from our parents and guardians in May following about 2 months of distance learning, and 71% of our parents said that their students are struggling socially and emotionally. So we are constantly evolving our programs to meet the new needs of our students as well.
Thank you. Well, you've all given us a good briefing on the nature of your work and the context. So my next question is, can you each talk about some of the specific skills that you focused on and actually share with us how did you help students acquire these important psychosocial skills? So let's start with Susan on this one.
Great. I have so much to talk about. I hope I can keep it to within 4 minutes, as I'm sure everybody does too. So one of the most critical skills that we focus on is motivation, student motivation. And children from early years onward, they want to know the point of what they're learning. It's not enough to know something, they need to know what it means. And our mission, therefore, is to excite each child's innate curiosity and help them grow that curiosity into action. So we've created an environment that constantly and thoughtfully engages children while remaining open to the questions and pursuits that matter to them. So we'll have wonder walls in the classrooms where questions might seem off topic, but we don't want children not to have them acknowledged. So we'll have them write it on a post-it note and post it somewhere that can be attended to later. Whereas some of our teachers incorporate Da Vinci notebooks to record curiosities in their classrooms. Students also play an active role in defining the content of our curriculum through their curiosity-driven questions. So our curriculum development is ongoing and dynamic. And our teachers know they have the freedom to run with their students' interests and passions. Also, we don't place an arbitrary ceiling on their learning. So some students have joined us from alternate schools and they've been told, oh, you just have to wait for the others to catch up. We're not allowed to dip into the advanced curriculum. Here, we place no ceiling on their learning. And as a result, the students really feel seen and heard and valued. And we focus on having them remain in that zone of proximal development where with efforts and strategies in the face of challenge, they can become more proficient and actually master content. And we understand, most importantly, that in order for all of our students who come from a wide variety of backgrounds, both ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, and socioeconomic backgrounds, that in order for them to envision their potential, they have to see themselves represented within different disciplines. So they have to be introduced to eminent professionals from the same backgrounds that they come from, and so that they can see what they can aspire to. And we do this through a speakers bureau. We do this through biographies and autobiographies that focus on eminent professionals from a diverse backgrounds. But more importantly than focusing on their eminence, we focus on their journey and the failures and challenges and obstacles that they faced and how they overcame those. We had a deliberate decision not to institute grades until middle school so that students are free to focus on developing proficiency and uncovering and cultivating potential and developing new interests based on their intellectual peer group, and therefore developing productive habits of mind. We also focus on resilience and perseverance, which often has to do with regulating themselves. We have a wonderful social emotional curriculum called Mind Up, which focuses on the anatomy of the brain, and in particular the amygdala, and how the amygdala is your center of your emotional control. So we explicitly teach strategies and techniques for students to be able to regain control of their amygdala. We also teach them how the brain reacts to making mistakes and how there's more actually active activity going on in the brain when you're making a mistake than when you're getting everything right. We encourage risk-taking, which we call bravery, embracing failures and mistakes as growth opportunities. So we focus on a growth mindset. And also interpersonal skills. So active listening, teamwork and collaboration, leadership. We have a code of conduct that focuses on looking for the above and beyond behaviors of demonstration of respect and responsibility, integrity, perseverance, optimism, and exceptional kindness. And then how we do this is we just offer lots of opportunities for students. We have lots of professionals come in and talk to the students. We take students to conventions. We have them engage in competitions. And we have oral presentations that are encouraged throughout the grades. And we just always are looking for new ways, new opportunities to present to them. Thank you.
Great. So Katie, I know you already mentioned a few of the programs that you've developed at IMSA, but could you tell us more about what you do specifically to cultivate these skills in your students?
Absolutely. And as we look to build psychosocial skills with our students, we really do so through shared learning experiences with larger groups of students, as well as the one-on-one coaching relationships that exist. And that cannot happen without a safe and trusting living and learning environment. And I just want to identify that as really the foundation for this work to meaningfully happen. And I want to give credit to our school counselors who are clinically trained staff who work with individual students on mindfulness, healthy coping skills, and a variety of other practices to enhance psychosocial skills, and recognize our residence life staff, in particular our residence life counselors, who create that living and learning environment for our students and provide a lot of that individual coaching. When it comes to social skills, we are really focused on developing and maintaining healthy relationships. And that is foundational and really begins with the design of our living experience for our students. Our students have a living community, a wing community is what we call it, of 18 to 24 peers. And we're really intentional to mix the ages of our students. We have sophomores, juniors, and seniors all living together to allow for some natural mentorship for our younger incoming students to learn from the lived experience of our upperclassmen. Each wing community is assigned one resident counselor who is a staff member who lives on campus within that same wing to provide programming for all students, as well as individual support for each unique student, and meeting with them weekly or bi-weekly. The residence life curriculum and those shared learning experiences which occur weekly are focused on social responsibility, life skills, interpersonal intelligence, and intrapersonal intelligence, and it's absolutely adaptive. So when we transitioned to distance learning, we had a lot of students identify that it was challenging to make relationships with people that you were not seeing on a day-to-day basis. They identified feeling disconnected from their peers. Even more so, though, they identified that they were having a hard time knowing how to properly connect with their faculty and how to send emails and what it meant to set up a meeting with those individuals. And we needed to pivot and create some new programming to really meet the needs of the students in this unique moment. And that's really our practice constantly. We also recognize that in creating a safe environment for our students and helping them build healthy relationships, that diversity education has to be at the center of what we're doing. So our students will have shared learning experiences. For example, our junior students are all in the process right now of watching a film, engaging in some individual personal reflection, and then a group discussion to process their own experiences. As I mentioned previously, we have students from across the state of Illinois. Illinois is a big state, so their lived experiences prior to coming to IMSA are very different from one another. And we really want to honor the culture and the diversity that exists within IMSA and help create a learning environment that is also safe and healthy for all of our students. When we think about protective skills and maintaining that well-being for our students, again, now super important in COVID times, we have had to implement some new strategies. We did develop a self-care tool for students to use individually. Starts off with some personal reflection questions to get them in the mindset to think about their wellness, which is not something our young people are really used to doing. And then going through an assessment, looking at physical, psychological, emotional, relational, spiritual, and schoolwork elements of their wellness. In the end, they can identify what steps they're already taking towards their self-care and what opportunities they have. And that's a tool that is used by our resident counselors then to sit down and talk about how they're creating really good self-care practices for themselves. And we've implemented something similar with our staff because we'd like to ask our staff to model the behavior for our students as well. We've also utilized the 4 disciplines of execution model with our students to help them create wildly important goals around sleep, and use some peer accountability to work towards shared goals to create healthy behaviors. Our students, when they're living with one another, they can influence each other in a really positive way, as I talked about with that natural mentorship. Or alternatively, they can create some really unhealthy behaviors, and that's something that we've identified with sleep. And so involving students in the goal setting process and the accountability process with their peers has been incredibly beneficial.
Thank you. So, Christy, in your supplemental programs that are STEAM focused, how do you specifically cultivate psychosocial skills?
Well, we do a lot of what the other folks have described, which is wonderful. I love things being reinforced. I think the first thing that we do is we put a lot of training into our staff. We learned early on not to assume that because we're grown-ups that we have all of those necessary skills and can in fact support our students. And in our case, one of our trainers was Rena, so that's been very helpful. And we bring in experts wherever we can. I think that for us, we put a lot of focus, besides on the kids and the psychosocial, again, is on the grown-ups, because we're dealing with some traditional educators, whether they're pre-service teachers, classroom teachers, or our staff, but we're also dealing with a lot of STEAM professionals who are quite good at what they're doing, but they're not necessarily trained in how to explicitly identify and support. And that's certainly been part of our goal with our project. So emphasizing the PD for everybody. I think for us, the social skills that have been critical come back to that risk taking, because so much of what we are doing is the project base and asking the kids to work in teams. They're so far out of their comfort zones. And so we spend a lot of time using the design thinking strategies around empathy and just seeing things from another perspective. We found that with adolescents, sometimes that's a challenge because we're very self-focused at that age as well. The idea of perfectionism, and again, for us, the design thinking process is so valuable for this because we're constantly iterating, and the students understand within the culture that we're creating that it's not just a one-off, you're doing it and you get a great grade or not a great grade and you're done, but how do you constantly improve upon that? There are specific ways that we're doing this. So for example, we purposely organize our programs with students from specific schools. So for example, all of the students from Hudson would come to us and work together throughout the Saturdays and summer. And we do that for a very specific reason, because we want these kids to be able to practice these psychosocial skills, not just with us and not with just their peers, and not just in our setting about a school time, but be able to carry that back into their K-12 experience, especially in our low-income public schools. For us, check-ins are critical. And we do check-ins both with the individual students every morning. So that's part of our ritual and culture. We do a lot of prep work with the family, so we get to know what life is really like for each one of our individual kids. This has been certainly exacerbated and enhanced, if you will, with COVID, because by working virtually, we have many kids who, besides having real issues of access to technology, there are a lot of other social, economic, other kinds of emotional issues going on at home that they're coping with. So it's been essential for us to empathize and understand that and do a lot of outreach. I would say that, again, emphasizing the practice. We do tremendous amount of just encouragement. You're doing it. Look where you are now to where you were just 6 months ago. I love what I was hearing earlier about the Wonder Wall. We do that as well, even virtually, which has been great. It's been key for us, especially in the new COVID world, to allow our students the self-efficacy of when they want to have their videos on versus not. And empowering them to make those kinds of choices. Having the opportunity to just socialize and practice those skills, persistence, empathy, engagement with each other in our virtual world. They are not getting that in their regular virtual classroom. And one of the biggest things we're hearing back from our kids is they're grateful for the opportunity to really hang out and explore ideas with their peers. Likewise, we're hearing back with our classroom teachers that they're loving this program because they're dealing with such a myriad of issues. They have even less focus on our gifted kids.
Mhm. Thank you. It's clear that you all have been very thoughtful about bringing psychosocial skills to the forefront and developed a wide range of strategies, some of which are specific to a residential versus a lower income population. It's very useful to hear how you've customized them based on your setting and the students you're working with. So now I'd like to ask you all, our audience is largely practitioners, and if you could share what you have learned. You've been doing this obviously thoughtfully and for a while, but what can you share about how to go about incorporating the cultivation of psychosocial skills into your setting, your curriculum, your environment? What have you learned? What is your best advice, your tips? What have you learned that you can share with practitioners who are just beginning to think about this? Katie, can we start with you?
Yes, thank you. I already shared just a few minutes ago that creating a safe and trusting environment, specifically peers trusting adults, but also a peer-to-peer trusting environment, is truly necessary when building psychosocial skills. There are two other key areas that I will focus on. One being finding meaningful ways to engage students and parents in creating your psychosocial skill developmental experiences. And IMSA's leadership education program that I mentioned previously is a shining example of this. The program was actually created in the year 2000 with a group of students and practitioners sitting around a table for about a week, planning an experience for students based on their needs and their wants and their desires. And the power of the student voice is so important for generating buy-in and authentic learning experiences. And we continue to honor the student voice through this program now, 20 years later. LEAD is a year-long peer-facilitated student experience. It is a graduation requirement for all of our sophomores. And we bring in IMSA students and we say, you can change the world. We've embraced the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Pick an SDG and think about how you can work towards solving this global challenge. And that's really big, right? That's really big for a young person. And so through the LEAD program, we get them collaborating with their peers and we develop their voice so that they can articulate their ideas and build buy-in for those ideas. And at the end of the year, they have the opportunity to identify that problem and present a product that addresses it as a solution with a group of their peers. And that product is published then in IMSA's Digital Commons. So it's publicly available. It's something that they can now share globally, and it really inspires them from an early age, the beginning of their IMSA career, that they have the ability to change the world. And it's facilitated by IMSA students, by juniors and seniors. And so we also have that added benefit of the learning that happens with our juniors and seniors. Another way that we have intentionally engaged students and parents is using the Year of Inquiry model, which really by design is to engage in an in-depth examination of a current challenge that significantly influences your institution's work and mission. Key stakeholders come together to identify both the scope of and potential solutions to the challenge together through a year-long investigation. I had the opportunity to actively lead this process in 2018 and 2019, with the topic being student mental health and wellness, and saw the power of really having parents, faculty, staff, and students all around the table engaging in that meaningful work together. The second piece that I would highlight is the intentionality that should go into collecting data and using that qualitative and quantitative data to inform your work. IMSA began using the Challenge Success student survey tool 3 years ago, and I personally find this to be a robust survey instrument that informs my work on the daily. We also use the CWRA Plus assessment, which is the College and Work Readiness Assessment Plus, and that measures critical thinking and written communication skills. Lastly, I would mention I cannot emphasize the value of student focus groups enough, and just that opportunity to honor the student experience and the student voice. Data is great, surveys are wonderful, assessments and tests give us good feedback and data, but it does not compare to sitting down in the residence hall with students or having a conversation over a cup of coffee with parents to really understand their experience. And so again, I would absolutely recommend that you're engaging students and parents in your work and that you're intentionally collecting that feedback.
Thank you. Susan, can I ask you, what is your advice for others who are now interested in putting a greater focus on psychosocial skills in their school or their context?
Sure. Well, I love what Katie had to say. I'm going to actually take some of that and apply it to our program. I think that to not be afraid of integrating the psychosocial skills into the curriculum, it's easier than you think, that it can infiltrate every aspect of your curriculum, whether it's structured curriculum or unstructured times during the day. A great way to encourage discussions about these skills is through literature, nonfiction and fiction, also current events. And then you need to really be explicit about putting the names to the skills for students to help them understand what these skills are and why they're important to develop now in preparation for their future. They must know the why. And then make time and space for professional development, which I heard Christy refer to. You do, it's unfortunately our educators or our speakers or STEM professionals are not trained in identifying what the psychosocial skills are or how to help best develop them in students. So I think professional development is really critical for success for every teacher and administrator to get on board, because once they have the expertise and they feel comfortable with understanding what psychosocial skills are all about, they can translate that into their teaching. And reaching out to as many mentors as you can to build a clearinghouse of human capital that you can call upon, that can inspire your students, and they're really tangible, and they're not just people who they read about in books, but actually current eminent professionals. And then again, I loved what Katie said about educating parents. It's not intuitive to them. These children don't come with guidebooks. So we really do need to take the time to educate our parents who want so badly to help their children, and they just don't always know how. In our middle school, we purposely keep our class sizes very small in our school in order to build more meaningful relationships between peers as well as teachers and students, and that promotes a greater sense of self-confidence. But in our middle school, we actually have taken our independent projects and added a social justice component so that they can take the perspective of other people who are different than they are and really identify problems that are affecting a group of people or a community, and really focus on what they can do and the impact that they can make on that issue. So those are some of the things I would recommend.
Thank you, Susan. Christy, can you share your best advice?
I coalesce it down to 3 topics, and they've certainly been both covered by Katie and Susan to some degree. First and foremost, I cannot emphasize enough relationships, and 360, having the relationships with families. There's nothing like sitting down with a group of kids. They'll tell you what they think. It's amazing. You take the time and they'll tell you. Likewise with the parents. And we find that the parents are, as the kids, the parents are so grateful to have someone even ask them their opinion, let alone act upon it. One of the things that we have found with relationship building is circling back, being able to be very explicit with the parents and with the students with feedback. How have they improved? What have they seen as changes in their empathy, their behavior, their persistence? It's been wonderful, especially around collaboration or speaking up. That's been key. Secondly is having our teachers model. And we're big at Dramatic Results and with our program about what we call failing forward. We have our grown-ups constantly model taking risks, flubbing, failing forward, celebrating it, laughing about it and saying, okay, iterate, next time, try it again. And what we have found is modeling that has really been powerful, both with our STEAM collaborators with whom we work, as well as with our kids. And I think thirdly is to remind teachers, utilize your resources. Our communities are rich with resources. And we have so many of our STEAM collaborators who have said, thank you. We love the opportunity to share what we're doing with your kids. And with that, what we're finding is that we have kids that are finding passion. And when our kids find passion in particular careers or areas that are interested in them, they have somebody who can talk their language and they can go deeper. And that's really exciting. But that's for us been the greatest hook to develop those psychosocial skills, is to hook it on what the kids are passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you all. We're running out of time, but I do want to share. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work well. Share some information about each of the organizations that we talked about today, so that you can get more information should you need to. I want to put that up on the screen first. So hang in there with me. Can everybody see that?
Mhm.
Great. I just want to summarize a little bit what I heard. When you guys were talking about skills, there was a lot of overlap despite the differences in your environment. And I heard multiple times an emphasis on developing collaboration skills and teamwork skills, on developing leadership and kind of awareness of big world problems that these students might be interested in, might be prepared to work on as they develop into adults, adjusting to challenge, understanding how to be a self-advocate, dealing with struggling intellectually and in other ways, and getting used to failure, and risk-taking. So those were some of the skills that you all mentioned across your different settings. And then also some themes that came across were, I think these were very powerful: honor student voices, listen to students. As Christy said, they'll tell you what they're thinking. And also all of you mentioned working collaboratively with families, how important it was to build relationships with families, and to also to walk the talk, so that it was important that individuals working with the students, whether they be well-trained teachers or STEM professionals, model the skills that they want the students to acquire. Also, another theme was that this doesn't necessarily have to be a separate program, although there are aspects of psychosocial skills that can be, especially in a residential environment, but integrating the development into the curriculum and into the activities that are a normal part of students' programs. I loved something Susan said. She said, create a clearinghouse of human capital. And Christy added to that community resources. And finally, being explicit and intentional about the task of cultivating psychosocial skills. So I think I want to thank all our panelists for the information that they shared, and I'm sure it will be very useful to our practitioners. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.